Hello there. A slightly different video format today. It's always good to try something new. You're never sure if it's going to work or not. I'm in Leith again, and I'm just going for a wander around some of the streets in Leith. And we're going to compare what we're wandering through with what's on an 1852 Ordnance Survey map or town plan. You know, it's interesting to see the changes that have taken place in that period of time. The 1852 town plan is the first map that Ordnance Survey came out with. You know, middle of the 19th century, that's when Ordnance Survey started doing their thing. And their maps are just accurate. Unlike some older or previous maps, where the accuracy wasn't that great and the scale wasn't that great, Ordnance Survey are just absolutely spot on. What you see on the map is what was there on the ground. We'll be wandering around with a handheld camera, you'll be able to see what we're walking through, and then we'll have a look at what was there on the map. And accompanying that footage on the map, and the maps will be a voiceover. Very rarely will you get to see me. Well, you'll get to see me at the end of the video when we'll see if we can find a pub, have a pint and a chat. That's really what these videos are about, me having a beer. The history's not really that important. In fact, let's just forget the history and go straight to the pub. No, let's not. Let's do a wee bit of history first. Leith has changed a lot. You know, it's been a port or harbour since the 13th century. And as is often the case with places beside large stretches of water, whether it's the sea or wide rivers or firths, there's been a lot of toing and froing between the land and the sea. Some areas that were once the sea or the water have been reclaimed and are now land. New docks have been built, and then later these docks have been filled in. It's a constant, almost a battle between the land and the sea. And I think that's pretty evident in the first place we're going to have a wander, at least past, and that's Tower Street, just off the shore.
In 1852, Leith was clearly a sizable town, having had hundreds of years to develop after becoming a major port around 1300. It was indeed Scotland's premier port after the English took Berwick-upon-Tweed in 1296. But by 1852, there wasn't much room left, and there must have been much thought about reclaiming land at the edge of the Firth of Forth. If we stood by the old signal tower on the shore and looked along Tower Street in 1852, there would have been nothing but a railway line on our left. The waters of the Firth of Forth didn't quite reach the railway line, and there must just have been a sandy or rocky shore from there down to the high water mark. At this date, this was the edge of Leith, and in the distance, at the end of Tower Street, was Leith railway station and the gasworks. But clearly sometime between 1852 and the next town plan of 1876, huge walls were built in the waters of the Firth of Forth, along with new docks like the Albert Dock. A sizable portion of land was reclaimed to build sheds, coal depots and timber yards, all with railway lines leading to and from them. Leith had suddenly got an awful lot bigger. Fading from 1876 to a modern satellite image lets you see that most of these new docks still exist, although one or two of the smaller ones have since been filled in. But in addition, more land reclamation has taken place, resulting in a vast area of dockland. The battle between the land and the sea. Walking along the shore from the old signal tower, we find a variety of eating and drinking establishments. There's Fisher's at the foot of the tower. There's one called The Shore, with old wine and spirit merchant letters on the facade. And one called The Ship on the Shore. Back in 1852, this was a row of taverns ideally located to quench the thirst of sailors on shore leave. You had the Tower Tavern at the foot of the tower and now Fisher's, the Old Blue Bell Tavern, New Ship Tavern, Royal Landing Place Tavern, named after and close to the spot where in 1822 King George IV landed, and the Old Ship Tavern. It's sometimes difficult to tell, but it's probably just the buildings that once housed the Tower Tavern and the Old Ship Tavern that still exist, the others being later constructions. While wandering around, we find any number of alleys bearing the name Timberbush. These days they seem to lead to vast areas of modern housing. We can see those lanes in the 1852 map, a warren of back lanes with openings into the shore, Tower Street and Bernard Street. This is a remnant of a vast marketplace where timber was offloaded from ships and sold. We can see that large area in Alexander Wood's map of 1777. I'm unsure where that timber marketplace would have moved to, but certainly in our 1852 map there's a new timber basin just offshore and timber yards dotted around the general area. As you wander around Leith today, there are many tantalising old lanes and wynds that you feel you simply have to explore. Our 1852 map doesn't always tell us what the buildings lining the alleys once were, but it's interesting to just wander and dream. This one's just off Bernard Street, leading to old works and warehouses. In Bernard Street itself, we can see more taverns. The King's Arms Tavern, the White Horse Inn, and Bernard's Nook, the latter once a name given to the area, and here in 1852 most likely the name of yet another pub or tavern. Looking down Bernard Street today, the view is probably much the same as the view in 1852. On our map, there's the National Bank building on our left. You can see the same domed building in this 1882 photograph. The building behind the horse-drawn tram, like most buildings in our map in Bernard Street, still exists, and today houses Carrier's Quarters at number 42, yet another drinking establishment. There's 42 in the 1852 map, but not marked as a tavern on this map. Back to the shore now, and today we see one of Leith's oldest buildings, the King's Wark, built in the 15th century and serving many functions over the years, from royal residence to armoury and storehouse. It's clearly shown on our 1852 map, along with an adjacent clock tavern and nearby Crown Tavern. Lots of taverns in the old days. But let us now head over the water of Leith, by the old Custom House and into Sandport Street. As you can see, the Custom House is shown on our 1852 map, along with two vanished pubs on the Sandport Street corner, the Globe Tavern and the Commercial Tavern. The bridge at this location over the water was at that time a narrow drawbridge called the Lower Drawbridge, which can be partially seen in this drawing dating to 1829, along with the Custom House itself. Down Sandport Street and Quayside Street, and we come to another of Leith's very old buildings. What a stunning structure. It dates back to the 15th century, with various additions and repairs over the years, like the Dutch-style steeple and clock tower added in 1675. In later years it became incorporated into St Ninian's Works and other businesses and played an industrial role. Here it is in 1885, sitting by St Ninian's Wharf, and again in 1952, 100 years after our map. We now come to a particularly interesting area of Leith. It's where Dock Street joins with Commercial Street. There's just so much going on here. The first thing we see is a rather grand little church. Our map tells us that this was the Mariners' Church, an apt title for a major port. Attached to it was a school for boys and a school for girls, and there the twain shall meet. Right beside it is Citadel Port, the only remains of a large defensive citadel built by Cromwell's forces in the 1650s. You can see the citadel very clearly in Alexander Wood's map of 1777, and how it faced directly onto the shore. Today, it's only the port or entrance that remains. But there's more. If we wander just a few metres inside Tyso's grounds and onto Commercial Street, we find a little building, looking a tad lost and forlorn amidst the wall of warehouses on the other side of the street. This, as we can see in our 1852 map, was once Leith Railway Station. Like the station on Tower Street, this one's just called Leith Station on the map. You'd think they'd have different names to distinguish between the two. But apparently this one was called the Leith Citadel Station. As we can see, the lines from here entered a tunnel close to what is now Cooper Street. But if we head back to our map, there's even more going on in this small area. Within what is now Tyso's grounds was once another tavern, the Buck's Head Tavern, and on the other side of the railway station was the Vulcan Iron Foundry. The street layout in this area has changed beyond all recognition from our 1852 map, with the loss of many streets like Cromwell Street, Citadel Street and Johnson Street. Over the Great Junction Street Bridge now, and in Mill Lane we find ourselves hemmed in by grand grey buildings. There will have been changes over the years, both architecturally and in use, but as we can see from our 1852 map, these buildings played a variety of roles with regard to health, both physical and mental, and social vulnerability. On our left, by St Thomas's Church, was Gladstone's female asylum for incurables, and on our right was Leith Hospital Dispensary. A bit further back on our right used to be the South Leith Poorhouse, sadly no longer with us. And so we venture down Shore Place, giving breathing space to a squirrel, and arrive back on the shore with a druth. Well, here we are amidst a forest of barrels. Chuchter's Landing. Pub I'm actually very fond of. It's got a nice outside seating area. Having said that, there's music going on in the background. You can't even sit outside without having to put up with music. A lot of people like that, you know. I would just like a bit of peace and quiet, you know. Is that too much to ask for? And hopefully the mic's not picking it up, or YouTube will be hitting me with all sorts of penalties. I was going to finish in the carrier's quarters, but it also has background music. I only came here because I thought I'd get a bit of quiet, but that's not the case. I was in fact going to make a video solely about carrier's quarters. As you may have heard in the last video that I put out, it's allegedly the oldest unaltered public house in Leith, dating to 1785. But for some reason, I'm not entirely convinced about that. But nevertheless, you know, I haven't really looked into it, so I'm not really in a position to argue. And the reason I wanted to make a video was simply because of the little room facing the street. It's just a tiny room, that room that it's alleged that the ladies of the night once sat at in the old days, looking out the window to tout their trade from passing sailors. That little room fascinated me. But it wasn't just that, it was also the stone curve of the wall behind the gantry. Because the door that led to that tiny little room looked as if at one time it would have been curved. I mean, there's no door there now, and this kind of the door frame on the bar side is straight, but if you look at the door, the frame above the door when you're in that little room is curved. And I thought, what is going on here? And I got myself into a bit of tizzy thinking this, that and the other, and imagining all these theories and things that might have happened. I thought initially that perhaps if there was no building attached to that building, then perhaps it had a curving external wall that was echoed in the curving internal wall. And I thought, well, maybe when they then built a building adjacent to that one, they thought, well, that curve's not going to work. We'll change that and make it that corner right angled straight so that it kind of blends in with the new building beside it.
I was imagining all these different scenarios. But at the end of the day, I think it's just a load of nonsense. I think it was just a cupboard. You know, I well imagine that the building dates to the very early 19th century. It's Georgian. It was, I think, fairly common for you to get maybe curved walls back then and curved doors in the little cupboards. So I'm pretty certain it was just a cupboard. I mean, there is a notice inside, through the back, giving a bit of history about the pub, and it does mention a cupboard in the northwest corner. This little tiny room is actually in the southwest corner, but I still think it is a cupboard, or was a cupboard. I'm not utterly convinced about it, the sort of facts in that fact sheet that's framed on the wall, because it does mention that the pub used to be called the King's Arms or something. That may well have been the case, but when you look at the map that today's video is all about, dating to 1852, or actually 1849 to 1852, but let's not get too bogged down in facts. There was a pub in Berners Street called the King's Arms. Hold on a minute. I thought a seagull had just stolen somebody's glasses. I don't know what is that? No, it's a tub of sauce. Seagull's helped herself to some tomato sauce. But yeah, there was a pub called it. In fact, let me just not check just now. If I've got the name wrong, I'll correct it at the bottom of the screen. Which was a little further towards the shore. So it wasn't this one, but that's not to say that the Carrier's Quarter did once be known as the King's Arms. So anyway, they decided that they couldn't do a video about that. If, you know, a video about a cupboard's not really cutting it. Which is why I thought I'd do this video. It's quite strange these days when you consider the price of beer in public houses throughout the UK. There is such a range of prices. It doesn't always necessarily go with different areas of the country or different breweries or whatever. I'll give you one example. I had a pint of one of the Stewart Brewing Company's beers. It's an Edinburgh brewery, New Edinburgh Brewery. I had a pint of their beer in the Carrier's Quarters the last time I was here. I can't remember exactly how much it was. It was about £4.80 or something like that. It was less than £5. On the same day, I popped into the King's Wark, which is a mere spit away from Carrier's Quarters. And again, I got a pint of something from the Stewart Brewing Company. It was a different beer, but it wasn't any stronger or anything that would warrant a different price. It was a similar strength beer, just a different beer. It was £6.50. That's a heck of a difference locally and with the same beer. And you sort of wonder if brewers are not able to sort of dictate or somehow influence the price of their product when it's been sold in public houses. Clearly, they're not. I mean, the drinks industry is in a real mess just now. It's still struggling from COVID, and it's just so many pubs got out of business. But if you compare that with Sheffield, where a couple of really good pubs in the Kelham Island area, good beer, we're talking £3.80. I mean, the difference between £3.80 for a pint and £6.50, we're almost talking double the price here. And you think, what is going on? Like, you know, I noticed that in another pub in Edinburgh, a beer £6.50 for a pint. That's just ridiculous, like, you know. I'd be reluctant to go back to a pub that sold beer at that price. I don't drink spirits, it's only beer I drink. This is Timothy Taylor's Landlord, which is kind of okay-ish, you know, condition-wise, it's drinkable. And the glass has got some sort of bubble pattern on the inside, which always, I never like. I always like a clean glass that's been properly cleaned, you know. But you know, even if you don't drink spirits, beer is alcohol. You can get yourself into real difficulties if you drink too much of this stuff. Last time I was through here, it was for the Blues and Jazz Festival in Leith. Drink beer, listen to music, great stuff. But when I went back to Waverley railway station, I got on the train and there was a young lad lying on the floor of the train just outside the toilet. He wasn't completely on the floor, he was slightly propped up against the side of the train carriage. He was totally out of it. And I kind of went over and just gently kind of shook him in a kind of half-hearted way, if I'm honest. And what instantly struck me when I kind of gave his shoulder a little kind of shake was that his whole body seemed stiff and sort of rigid. And what immediately went through my mind was his deed and rigor mortis is already set in. And I turned away and there was a woman who was coming to also help. And I said to her, I think he's dead. But she had a bit more gumption than me. She was more on the ball than I was. She said he's not dead. And she went over and gave him a right good shake, which woke him up. And I kind of went outside and stood just outside the train door to maybe help him off the train, but he was given, saying, you know, he was all right. And he was staggering, he couldn't walk, he was staggering all over the place, and if there's one place you don't want to be staggering about all over the place, it's a railway station. And he fell onto a chair. I'm sure he hurt himself, you know, and I think he kind of got onto the chair himself, but I kind of maybe helped him a little bit to make sure he was sitting in the chair. And I said, look, wait, just sit there, for goodness sake, don't go up. I think the police probably eventually, I don't know if they're arrested is the word, people like that just need a lot of help, you know. What a state to get into. I found it a little bit upsetting, to be honest. When you're in that state, you're a danger to yourself, you're at risk of injury and even death, you know. So it upset me. I think many people will have recollections of incidents where they've drank too much alcohol and been totally worse for wears. But I think I now realise what the phrase dead drunk means. I don't think I've ever seen anyone as dead drunk as that, you know. Poor guy. What a state he'd been in the morning. Anyway, that's a video on your chat.
Are you okay?
I'm not really enjoying this beer, to be honest.
Well, I feel like last week, I'm forgetting about last week's, it almost feels like it doesn't count for me.
At least the sun's out.
It feels like a wee vacuum, and now I'm back.
I hope you've enjoyed the video. You know, just to kind of wander around and compare the things with an 1852 map. And as I think I said at the beginning of the video, where you've got water and a harbour and a port, and it is a constant fight between the land and the sea. I strongly suspect, I mean, this area, I think would have been a lot of docks here, but a lot of what we see behind us was obviously not there in 1852, and not sure how far the water came. If you've watched the video, I'm sure you'll know. I'm Eddie Burns, take care, and I'll see you again.